Hello everyone, welcome to Unit 4, Day 6. We're going to talk some more about two-variable inequalities today. Our goals, we want to be able to graph two-variable inequalities given the symbolic inequality. So if they told us like y is greater than 3x plus 1, we want to be able to graph that thing and see what it looks like. We also want to be able to go the other way. So for instance, if they give us an already made graph, we want to be able to tell what the original inequality was. So making sure that we can go from symbolic inequality to graph and graph back to symbolic inequality. Those are our two goals today. All right. Now I included a table here just to kind of recap and summarize what we've learned about these different symbols when we see them in the two variable inequalities. So for instance, when we see this is what we call greater than or equal to. All right. In words, this is what that symbol means. It means greater than or equal to. Okay, and when we see that greater than or equal to symbol, when we go to graph our line on the graph, it's going to be a solid line, and it also kind of tells us where we're going to shade, right? Since we're greater than, we want to shade above the line. So we're going to shade all of the points that are above the line. Now this one says less than or equal to. And again, because we're allowed to be equal to, we make our line solid, but we would shade below the line since we want to be less than. All right. Now this is just simply greater than. Okay, so we're not allowed to be equal anymore. You'll notice the equal to bar is missing underneath the inequality symbol, so this is just greater than. And we're going to make a dash line. We're not allowed to use any of the points that are actually on the line, so we have to be strictly above the line, right? So that's when we're going to shade. We shade above the line with a dash line, indicating that we cannot use any of the points that are actually on the line. All right, and then our last symbol down here is less than. So this means less than, and again, we're not allowed to be equal to, so we're going to have a dash line, and since we are less than, we want to shade below the line when we see that symbol. All right, so you might refer to this table a couple of times as we go through these problems, and that's okay. So let's see what we've got here. We've got a couple of inequalities that we need to graph, right? So we have our inequality given to us here. It's a two-variable inequality because I can see two variables, y and x, and I've got our step-by-step over here just to remind us what to do. Right now it says graph the inequality just like you would any other line, right? So we start off thinking about mx plus b, right? Because when we graph a line, we use the slope and the y-intercept, right? So from our symbolic inequality, I'm going to extract our slope, and I'm going to extract our y-intercept. So remember, our slope is the number in front of x, which I can see right here. This is negative 1/3, okay? So I'm going to say my slope is negative 1/3, which means my rise is negative 1, my run is a positive 3. Now b represents the y-intercept, which is plus 2 over here. Okay, so this is where we cross over the y-axis. This is where we intercept the y-axis. Remember, the y-axis is the vertical axis that runs right down the middle of our graph here. All right, so since our y-intercept is at 2, I'm going to go to 2, and I'm going to plot a point. And then I'm going to use my slope to tell me where to go from there. Since my slope has a negative 1 in the top, and that represents my rise, I'm going to go down 1. And since my run, or the number in the bottom of my slope here, is a 3, right? A positive 3 means I'm going to go down 1 and then right 3. 1, 2, 3. That gives me my second point. Now through those 2 points, I'm going to graph my line, but before I graph my line, I want to know whether or not it's going to be a dashed or a solid line, and I can tell that by looking at my inequality symbol. Since there's no equal to bar here, I can tell you right away that this is going to be a dashed line. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and draw my dashed line, and you might do this a little bit differently than I do since I'm using different kind of technology. You're probably just using pencil and paper. You might just draw your line dash, which is fine. I draw mine solid, and then I like to erase little chunks out of it. I gotta get this lined up. There we go. That's pretty close. Then I grab my eraser, just like this, and I like to go through and just dash it. There we go. So we have a dashed line. Okay. And then we got to figure out where are we going to shade. And again, I look at my inequality symbol to figure that out. And since it is greater than, we're going to shade above. Okay, so greater than means I'm going to be shading all of the points up here. So I like to grab a highlighter to do this, and I shade just like this. Again, not going to be perfect here, but right, shade everything over here just like that. Okay. And like I said, you're using a pencil. You don't have to shade it in very dark. Just something that indicates that you know all the solutions are going to be on this side of the line. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my pen. So this is a complete graph of this inequality that we have here. And the final question that they ask you here is whether or not 0, 0 is a solution. So the point 0, 0 is located right here. And you'll notice that all of our solutions are in the shaded region, right? So this blue region that I created here, that's where all of our solutions exist. 0, 0 is not in that shaded blue region, so the point 0, 0 is not a solution. Okay. All right, let's try it one more time. Let's do one more over here. We're going to do y. It says y is less than or equal to negative 5x plus 3. So again, we want to identify our slope, and we want to identify our y-intercept. All right, so remember our slope is the number in front of x. So at face value, we would just say, well, our slope is negative 5, but we like to think in terms of rise over run. So whenever we see a whole number just like this, we're going to say negative 5 over 1, right? If this were 4, we would say 4 over 1. If this were 2, we would say 2 over 1. And the reason that we do that is because, like I said, we like to see what the rise is and we like to see what the run is. Okay, so writing a whole number as a fraction by placing it over 1 is beneficial. Now we have this plus 3 on the end. That represents our b value, or the location where we're going to cross over the y-axis. So we can say b equals 3, and that tells me on my graph that this is where my line is going to cross over the y-axis here at 3, and I would plot a point there. It gives me an automatic point on my line. Now I'm going to use my slope to tell me where to go. Since this is negative 5 over 1, that means I'm going to go down 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and my run is a positive 1. So I'm going to go to the right 1, and I plot my second point. So there's my 2 points. Now I draw a line through those 2 points, and I want to make sure that I determine whether or not this line is going to be solid or dashed. So I look at my inequality symbol, and I see that equal to bar, and that tells me that we're going to have a solid line. Okay, so I'm going to grab my line tool here and get this line situated. Oh my gosh, it won't let go. There we go. Nope. Okay. There we go. That's pretty close. All right, so there's my line, all nice and graphed for us. And then since it is a solid line, we see that equal to bar there. We're just going to leave it solid. I'm not going to dash it. And then we need to figure out which side to shade. Now, according to our inequality symbol, this says less than or equal to, so we would shade below. And I know that this line is almost horizontal, so it might be a little bit difficult to tell what is above or below. But in this case, the below side is going to be over here on the left. Okay, so I'd grab my highlighter, and we would be shading everything over here on this side. So this would be our solution region here. So every point over here will make this inequality be true. If I picked any point on this side and I plugged it in, it would create a true inequality. Okay? So the question becomes, is the point 0, 0 a solution? So the point 0, 0 is located right here. We can see that 0, 0 is inside of the solution region. It's inside of that shaded region that we just created. So 0, 0 is a solution for this one. Okay. So what that means is if I took 0, 0 and I plugged it into my original inequality up here, if I plugged in 0 for y and 0 for x, we would get an inequality that is true. All right. Let's keep going. So I recreated the table here for your convenience so you don't have to flip back to the front page here. But in this situation, what we're going to get is a graph. So we have a graph here made for us, and our job is to write an inequality. Okay, so we want to know what inequality we should write. So this is going to be y, and then we're going to have an mx plus b, and we've got to figure out whether or not this is going to be greater than or equal to, or what symbol is going to go in between the y and the mx plus b. But I always like to just start with my blueprint like I have here, right? I have the y, I have the mx plus b, so I will figure out the symbol later. All right. So let's take a look at this graph. The first thing we need to figure out from the graph is what our slope is, and then we need to figure out what our y-intercept is. All right. So remember, our slope is rise over run, and so I'm going to write that as a fraction here. And I need to figure out, like, if I pick 2 points that exist on this line, and I travel from one point to the other, I need to figure out how far up or down I go, and how far to the left or to the right I go. So you'll notice that we have 2 points pre-selected here for us. So if I travel from this point to this point up here, I'm going to go up and to the right. So you can see our slope triangle formed by going up and to the right. So I'm going to go up 1, 2, 3. So it's got a vertical rise of 3. So I'm going to put that in for my rise. And then I'm going to the right 1. So I'm going to put in a 1 for my run. So now I know my slope. Now the b value is where we cross over the y-axis, and we can see here's the y-axis. This is the vertical axis that runs through the middle of our graph, and we can see that the line hits the y-axis right here at 2. So this is our y-intercept. Okay. So we're going to say that our b value is 2. So if I'm looking at my blueprint here right now, what I have is I have y, and then I have 3 over 1 x, and then plus 2. Right? We found b, we found m, I found those right here, and I just plug those in for m and b. Now I have to figure out which inequality symbol I'm going to use. All right, so the first thing I notice is that my line is dashed. Okay, so if I'm thinking about my different inequality symbols here, right, since it's dashed, I'm not going to use anything that has an equal to bar. So it's got to be one of these two. And you'll notice here where it's shaded. So since they shaded below the line, we want the less than symbol. All right, so I'm going to put a less than here, and that completes my inequality. All right, so we got to look for where it's shaded. We got to look for whether or not it's solid or dashed, and then we have to find the slope and the y-intercept. So we need those 4 pieces of information. So let's try it again over here. Again, I'm going to start with my blueprint. So I've got y and then mx plus b. Right? And I'm going to start by trying to find my slope and my y-intercept. So I'm going to go to these 2 points that they have picked for us here. And you can do this with any 2 points. You don't have to use the 2 points that they give you here. You can use any 2 points that exist on the line. I would recommend that you pick points that land on nice crosshairs here, so they land on the nice integer values. It makes it a lot easier to determine these pieces of information. All right, so I'm going to use the 2 points they gave us, and it's like we're traveling from this point to this point, so we have to go down, and we went down 1, 2, 3, so that means my rise is -3, and then we go to the right 1, right, so my run is going to be a +1, and then my y-intercept, right, so this is my y-intercept right here. That is where we cross over the y-axis, and it looks like it's at 1, 2, 3, so that's -3. So I'm going to plug those in, right? So I've got y, then we've got -3 over 1x minus 3, because that's where my y-intercept was. Now I have to figure out which inequality symbol I'm going to use. Okay, so my line is solid, right? So I'm going to have an equal to bar, and they shaded above the line, right? So we need a greater than symbol, and since the line is solid, I'm going to put an equal to symbol underneath. Right, and that completes my inequality. All right, guys, that is it for today's lesson. I hope you found that helpful. If you have any questions, make sure you let us know in the Zoom chat. Have a great day.